Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to MST.TV. This is Nishi here. In today's episode, we are talking about a number of different cards that are trending upwards in price due to either current or potential future meta usage. A big factor that we're going to be looking at here today is the OCG, because even though the games aren't exactly the same, we often see a lot of meta trends and techs brought over here from the OCG. Also, despite the lack of events right now, we do still have online tournaments which have proven to have quite the influence on the market already, and we're also apparently moving on with product releases as scheduled, as we're still expecting to get the new Battles of Legends set and Toon Chaos set within the next couple of months. The market has certainly shown us that over the last couple of months, even without events, it is always evolving and adapting, so we have to keep these things in mind in order to stay ahead of the curve. Let's get started. Alright, so kicking things off, let's take a look at Ghost Mortar and Moonlit Chill. So this card is a new card from Eternity Code, and despite being available for such a limited time, and in such limited quantities here in North America, the card is actually trending upwards as the set has officially released, which is kind of the opposite of what we would typically expect. Before, we actually saw Ghost Mortar dropping towards the $25 to $30 mark, but now we're seeing it at almost $40 a piece. Ghost Mortar is a card that a lot of people kind of disregarded and thought of as not being very useful due to its limited application compared to cards like Effect Veiler and Infinite Impermanence. However, it has actually become quite an important card in the meta. We're seeing it used in a lot of both side decks and main decks in online play, alongside both Veiler and Impermanence, which is interesting because a lot of people thought that it wouldn't be seeing any play at all. I think that this card is something that you'll have to be careful with if you want to hold on to it, depending on the meta, and I could see it moving either upwards or downwards in price. If Effect Negation continues to be very important, then maybe it goes up, but if it turns out that something like Ghost Spell or Ghost Ogre sees more play instead, then it could absolutely trend downwards. Nevertheless, as a Ghost Girl that hasn't yet been reprinted, you can't underestimate her too much. I would say it's pretty safe to at least hold onto your playset of Ghost Mortar, especially if you can pick it up for around $90 to $100, and then wait for a little bit to see what direction the meta heads in. Next up, let's take a look at a couple of different OCG trends. I really quickly first want to mention Heritage of the Chalice, which is a card that's played at 3 in the Flame Noble Knight deck. In the OCG, Flame Noble Knights are one of the top decks of the format, as it can use Smoke Grenade of the Thief to get rid of a key card from your opponent's hand, as well as learn about what cards your opponent has access to, as well as set up Borreload Savage Dragon when you're going first. Now, we've already started to see Heritage of the Chalice moving up in price, as it has gone from being a $1 to $2 card to now being a $5 card for either the ultra rare or secret rare version. It is definitely an important card in the deck, but there are a couple of questions that we need to ask ourselves before picking this card up. Firstly, with the reprints having already come in the Megatins, we don't know if this card is going to be reprinted again, perhaps in something like Toon Chaos, where we are getting a number of different Flame Noble Knight cards. And secondly, how good is the Flame Noble Knight deck going to be here in the TCG, and will it be anywhere nearly as successful as the OCG version currently is? There are very big differences between here and the OCG, both in terms of what decks are successful, as well as what generic cards are available. Thunder Dragons are still viable over there with Colossus at 1, Orcus are still a deck with Harp Horror at 1, and they have access to cards like Crossout Designator and Max C that we don't see here in the TCG, and these could definitely be factors that affect how valid Noble Knights are as a strategy over here compared to over there. Personally, I have a ton of copies of Heritage of the Chalice because I opened a ton of 2019 Megatins, so they were pretty free value for me, right? Like, I might move some of these if the price goes up more, but I'll keep a lot of copies to give to my friends and whatnot. I think that right now, I wouldn't go out of my way to buy a ton of these or pick up a ton of copies, but if you can slowly grab them as small pieces in trades, or you can snipe a couple of good deals, then they are really good cards to add in to round off trades. Okay, so this is a really cool, interesting one that we're starting to see in the OCG that I think might be interesting to take a look at here. So Crimson Blader is starting to see some play in the OCG because it's a really cool anti-meta synchro option over there. If you haven't heard of this card, it was really popular in Dragon Ruler format, right? If it runs over a monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, your opponent cannot normal or special summon level 5 or higher monsters during their next turn. It's good against Eldritch and Adamancipators, as they can't bring out cards like Eldritch or Borreload Savage Dragon. In the OCG, it can be really devastating against decks like Thunder Dragons or Flame Noble Knights because Thunder Dragons are fusion heavy, Flame Noble Knights are synchro heavy, and they both put out high level monsters. Now this card is actually fairly easy to make because a lot of decks are running Psyframe Gear Gamma, which is a pretty free level 8 synchro, but also Eldritch are able to make Crimson Blader quite easily by using a trap monster, which is level 5, and then normal summoning Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring or Ghost Ogre to use as a tuner. Also keep in mind that this card can be effective against decks like Invoked or Shaddolls, which were quite popular here in the TCG prior to the release of Secret Slayers. However, we do need to keep in mind that in order for this card to get its effect off, it has to destroy an opponent's monster by battle, which makes it a little bit more difficult to use. You would have to be going second, and your opponent would have to be in a position where they're allowing you to summon out Crimson Blader and allow you to run over their monster, and allow Crimson Blader to resolve its effect. So there are a couple of different conditions that might limit the viability of this card here in the TCG. Now this isn't something that has really picked up yet here, so you can still grab your copies for fairly cheap. Secret rares are the most expensive from Legendary Collection 5Ds at $4 to $5 a piece, but you can still grab Astral Pack Super Rares for only $1 or so, and then rares for even less than $1. If you can find them for cheap, they are great pickups in my opinion for now because of how small an investment they are, so I would recommend grabbing them sooner rather than later if you have the chance before people start picking up on them. Another OCG tip here, Cyber Dragon Nova is actually a card that's starting to see play in the OCG as well. So as I'm sure a lot of you know, the Dragma are a really big archetype in the OCG, being splashed into basically every single deck. One of the key cards, Maximus Dragma, forces your opponent to send cards from their extra deck to the graveyard. Normally this can be pretty annoying, right? Especially because so many different decks are tight on extra deck space. One of the ways that people are playing around this is by playing Cyber Dragon Nova, because when your opponent's Maximus Dragma forces you to send cards from your extra deck to the graveyard, this will actually proc the effect of Cyber Dragon Nova, and people use this to get a free copy of Invoked Mechaba onto the field, which is a fusion machine, which is really cool. Obviously, this isn't a thing here in the TCG yet, but it could definitely be a possibility when Rise of the Duelist drops later this year. Now, fortunately, Nova has been reprinted a couple of times as a common, so they are fairly cheap and less than $1, though the ultra rares from the Cyber Dragon structure deck are already up at around $4 a piece as the only holo available version for this card. At the very least, I would grab your low rarity versions of both Nova and Mechaba now because they are so cheap and readily available. If you want to play the higher rarities though, it kind of depends on whether or not you think that this little package is actually going to see some meta relevance when Rise of the Duelist comes out in August of this year. So really briefly here, I want to talk about Sky Striker Mecha Widow Anchor, which is one of the scariest cards in the Sky Striker deck. We're actually starting to see Sky Strikers be a little bit more successful over the last couple of online events, with them taking several top spots over the past weekend. I think that Widow Anchor, being one of the most important pieces of the deck, is a card that you guys should absolutely be keeping an eye on moving forward. If the deck continues to do well, the card could absolutely continue to trend upwards in price, especially if it moves to 3 on the upcoming ban list, as a lot of people are expecting. I would also keep an eye on all of the Sky Striker cards moving forward, as I think that if we see some really spell-heavy decks in the meta in the future, there's a very strong chance that it could splash some Sky Striker cards into it as tech options, and Widow Anchor would certainly be at the top of that list. Now, there are 3 printings of Widow Anchor available. The originals from Dark Saviors, you're looking at around $10 for first eds or $6 for unlimiteds. The Battles of Legend Secret Rares, you're looking at around $3 each, and then you can still grab the Megatin Ultra Rares for about $1. Either way, expect this card to bump up a bit more if it does go to 3 on the next list, especially because of how popular Sky Strikers are as an archetype with a lot of the player base. Alright, so this is a pretty interesting one that really caught me off guard, but the key zombie cards from the Zombie Horde structure deck, those cards that are exclusive to this deck and haven't been reprinted yet, are actually all quite up there in terms of price. So right now you're looking at $6 for Doom King Baylordrock, $8 for Necro World Banshee, and then $3 to $4 for Glow Up Bloom. So that's a total of like $18 for 3 cards out of a $10 structure deck, which is kind of insane value if you think about it. It's kind of like with the Dino structure deck, how we saw Soul Eating Overraptor hit an insane price. Now, unfortunately, it's hard whether or not to say there's a good reason for this price jump, right? Like, a lot of different people are interested in zombies, but at the same time, I haven't really seen zombies do anything relevant recently. Personally, I'm still of the opinion that this package will be used in Eldritch when Red Eyes Dragoon comes to the TCG later this year, as Baylor Drock is one of the few outs to Dragoon that the Eldritch deck can have access to, and there is some natural synergy with Eldritch being a zombie as well. I think it's pretty easy for a lot of people to assume that structure deck cards are kind of cheap, so it's easy to overlook them, right? So these are definitely cards that you will want to know about if you have them, especially if you're looking to offload them. If you can still grab sealed structure decks for about $10 a piece, now is a great time to buy them up because you literally get more than your money back on these 3 cards alone. Despite that though, I would be looking to move these cards fairly quickly, just in case we do see certain pieces reprinted in the Battles of Legend set, or we get an unlimited wave of the structure decks coming out soon, kind of like what we're about to see with the Dinosaur structure deck. Next up is a card that's still quite cheap, but has quantities disappearing off the market already, and that card is for Mudskipper. So this card came out in the Salamangreat structure deck, and it does have quite a simple effect, allowing you to add a level 5 or higher Cybers monster from your deck to your hand if this card is sent to the graveyard as link material. This is an amazing effect because it does allow you to search Parallel Exceed, a new card that just came out in Eternity Code, which is basically a free rank 4 monster on the board like Abyss Dweller, Traptrix Rafflesia, or number 41 Bagushka. As a level 1 Cybers monster, you can turn it into Almirage, Link Karibo, or Baylynx, and this instantly opens up a zone to summon Parallel Exceed into. Now admittedly, this isn't a super popular meta strategy yet. I believe that most Salamangreat decks that topped over the last weekend or so didn't actually play this card, but as something that only has 1 printing available and has a lot of potential meta implications, it's something that I would be keeping an eye on and try to set aside for yourself whenever you find them, because depending on how the meta shapes up moving forward, and if we perhaps see Salamangreat get addressed further on the upcoming ban list because of how long they've been a deck for, we could definitely see this card become a $5 or more common fairly soon. Alright guys, the last card I want to talk about here is Toon Kingdom. So Toon Kingdom is a really interesting card, at the very least in terms of how its price has fluctuated over time. The original secret rares have actually always been fairly expensive, but not the reprint rares, right? In fact, I think that at one point you were able to buy the reprint rares for only around $6 or $7 a piece. However, now we are looking at $55 for a secret rare copy and a whole $37 for a rare, which is absolutely insane and says a lot about how crazy the collector's market can be over certain cards. I definitely think that a lot of this hype comes from the upcoming Toon Chaos set, which we will be getting later this month, and is of course going to be bringing us a lot of new Toon support. However, I think it is important to keep in mind 2 things. One, even if the support is really cool, I don't think that Toons are going to do anything meta relevant ever. Like, they'd have to receive some amazingly broken support to be even slightly relevant, which I don't think is too likely. And then 2, I'm fully expecting Toon Kingdom to be reprinted in Toon Chaos of all sets, right? And there's a decent chance that it could even be a collector's rare as such a highly sought after card. That being said, I think that the secret rares are probably okay holds if you already have them, because the original prints will always retain some value. I would absolutely get rid of all of your rare copies for now, because a non-holo reprint of a card isn't likely to retain long-term value when these alternative holo versions exist. Now, admittedly, there is a possibility that Toon Kingdom isn't reprinted in this set, and as a result, the rares do kind of skyrocket in price, but I think that that's a risk that I'm willing to take, because I find it extremely likely that if they are going to reprint Toon Chaos anytime this year, because it is such a high dollar card, it would be in Toon Chaos. Alright guys, that is it for today's episode. There is actually a lot of insight that we can gain from looking at the game over in the OCG, even though not everything is going to apply here, right? We can learn a lot from how the OCG has developed and figure out what things might be similar over here. And of course, you have to keep an eye on upcoming product here in the TCG as well, so that you can be as ahead of the curve as possible. We want to try to pick up cards while they're cheaper, before the hype has kind of hit here in the TCG, before we start seeing those crazy buyouts, so that we can sell them when the cards are being bought out at those hyped up prices. Anyways guys, if you enjoyed today's Market Watch episode, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button for me. It does help out a ton. Also, leave a comment down below. Let me know what else is going on in the market. Maybe tell me about a card that I didn't have a chance to cover in today's episode, so that I can potentially cover it in a future video and keep all of you as informed as possible. And of course, if you haven't already, please make sure that you hit the subscribe button to get all of the latest and greatest content from both Tombox and myself here on the channel. And until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST MST.TV.